In order that all sentient beings may attain Buddhahood, from my heart I take refuge in the three jewels. In order that all sentient beings may attain Buddhahood, from my heart I take refuge in the three jewels. In order that all sentient beings may attain Buddhahood, from my heart I take refuge in the three jewels. Whatever the virtues of the many fields of knowledge, all are steps on the path of omniscience. May these arise in the clear mirror of intellect. O Manjushri, please accomplish this. Good evening and welcome. Nice to see those of you I can see. So tonight we continue with Moonbeams of Mahamudra, and just to do a little sort of overview to try to contextualize things as well as address a couple of questions that have come up. So the path of Buddhism involves three aspects: Shila, conduct; Samadhi, meditation; and Prajna, wisdom. And if you use the format of the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path gets summarized into Shila, Samadhi, and Prajna. So this is the basic presentation of Dharma by the Buddha. The ground is suffering. The cause is initially stated as desire, and that aspect needs extreme needs to be looked into much more deeply. And then the result, so we have ground, path, fruition. We have the ground is suffering, the ground is samsara, and the fruition is liberation, cessation of suffering. Cessation of suffering by virtue of treading the path, by putting the path into action, which is how we overcome the cause of suffering, desire initially, which when we look into the Buddha's teachings more deeply, we find the root of desire is ignorance, as presented in the 12 nidanas, stages independent arising of samsara. And by uprooting ignorance, we bring about the liberation from samsara. The remaining 12 nidanas dissolve if we eliminate the root. And so the process for doing that is to tame our behavior through conduct and change our behavior to virtuous activity so that we create a harmonious condition in our life and in the lives of those around us to the extent we can. And we pursue the two main branches of the path, of which are meditation and the cultivation of wisdom or understanding through study. I'll come back to the through for wisdom. So for meditation, we have the two phases of meditative practice: shamatha, calm abiding meditation that stabilizes the mind, strengthens the mind, sharpens the mind, tames the wildness, the divergent energies of the mind, in order that the mind then become a fit tool, a fit instrument capable of pursuing insight. Vipassana meditation. And Vipassana meditation works in concert with the cultivation of wisdom, as in the third aspect of what's called higher learning, the third aspect of the path, wisdom or understanding, Shila, Samadhi, Prajna. And so Vipassana sort of encompasses both meditation and study. in terms of where it lands in the path. It brings the two together. Vipassana, as we read in the Profound Treasury Rinpoche says, Vipassana allows us to understand the Dharma. So the ability to understand the Dharma is the cultivation of wisdom or understanding, and that activity is called Vipassana. And there's a little bit of lack of clarity in terms of, well, is Vipassana a meditative practice on the cushion, or is Vipassana also off the cushion, previous or after the meditative sessions? And what is the relationship between Vipassana and Prajna, which is transcendent understanding? Prajna is understanding that goes beyond the dualistic framework and knows non-conceptually and directly the true nature of reality. And that process begins with studying the teachings, hearing the teachings, listening to them, and in particular the teachings around that revolve around what is the root of suffering, ignorance. How does that produce desire? That whole area of what is the root of suffering and how does it function is the focus of study and understanding, the development of understanding. By understanding how that happens, we understand how to release or relax that cycle. So that's the process of cultivating prajna, or understanding. And the term vipassana is applied both as a meditative practice that couples with shamatha, and also as the process of cultivating the different stages of prajna. So vipassana is used in a little bit of a broad way that I think causes confusion, but it does function off the cushion in the activity of studying the Dharma and learning to comprehend the profound meaning of the Dharma, which goes through three stages: hearing the teachings, contemplating them, and then meditating on them. And the meditation on them is where it is quite clear that it is then vipassana meditation, that is cultivating wisdom. So there's a crossover between meditation and wisdom where they come together. In trying to understand the source of suffering as ignorance, what is ignorance and how does it evolve into desire and then suffering, the main ways of approaching that in the Buddhist tradition are to look at what is our reality made up of? What does our reality consist of? And the sort of factual way of pursuing that is without getting philosophical at first, or hopefully ever, but just looking at our experience directly. What is it that we experience? And so then you say, well, how do we experience? What do we experience those things through? What faculties? And so the easy response to that is, okay, as sentient beings, we have various faculties. We have what seems to be a mind, and that mind has different ways of connecting with what we view as the outer world, called the five senses. And then it has the ability to think about those sense experiences and think about non-sensory experience. So sense experience, for example, the visual consciousness perceives color and shape. It doesn't perceive trees or houses or people or anything of that sort. The eye does not know from such complicated entities. All the eye knows is colors and shapes. All the ear knows is the different sounds that the ear hears. So it's the thinking mind that interprets those and assigns all sorts of value judgments onto them, like assuming that an assemblage of colors and shapes represents a unitary phenomena. So we look at the phenomena in our um, realm of vision currently: computers, tables, chairs, lamps, books, glasses of water, things like that. And each one of those, our mind has this fabulous capability of um, identifying them as unitary units. So we divide the laptop from the table, from the chair, from the floor and the ceiling, and all of those are different things. Whereas in reality, the difference between various things is not nearly so clear cut, because when we drill down to the molecular level, as we've been taught in the Western world of science, we're taught that there's vast differences in the composition of any one object. And so to call a laptop a unitary phenomena, as if it has a unitary status as one thing, is a complete simplification of our world. And so we learn that there's this distinction in our experiential apparatus, our experienced world, between phenomena that exist as the objects of our senses and phenomena that we apply to those um, sense experiences as the basis for presuming something else. And we call the colors and shapes of the laptop the basis of designation upon which we designate the idea of a laptop, and tables and chairs and people and all sorts of things like that. And so we generally live in a world of conceptual ideas. In order to begin the process of unraveling the sort of hypnosis that conceptuality produces for sentient beings, we return to the basic building blocks of our experience, which are categorized in terms of the sense faculties and their objects. So we have two schemes for that. We have a system of 12 factors where we have 6 sense faculties, including the mind as a sense faculty. And then we have 6 types of objects. For vision, its color and shape is fairly simple, and so on for the other 5 senses. What are the objects of mind? Mind as a sense consciousness. What are the objects of the sense consciousness mind? Anyone?
The five senses and concepts.
The 5 senses and concepts. So, Cynthia.
Did you mean like the aspects, the sort of replications of what we see outside in the mind?
No, I meant more along the lines that Robert was getting at.
Okay, just simply the sense.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. Mary Beth?
I was just going to say thoughts.
Thoughts. Yeah, thoughts. Um, so it's interesting, like, what is the difference between a thought and a concept, right?
I use
That's
the terms interchangeably.
that's interesting. Yeah, often they are used interchangeably. Sometimes there are slight differences between them, but the main division is what is between the the objects of mind that are not also the objects of the senses, thoughts, concepts. And the other thing that Robert referred to as the 5 senses, the mental consciousness sees the sense consciousnesses. It perceives the objects of those consciousness also in a direct way through the clear faculty of each of the sense consciousnesses. And so breaking things down in this way starts the process of prajna, of developing prajna, and meaning understanding and awareness of what our actual experience is separate from our conceptual framework. Our conceptual framework has created this world where we believe there's unitary objects that are independent and unchanging moment to moment, including, most importantly, you and I, people, me, lots of I's, lots of me's. We believe that there's somehow this meanness that floats around and relates itself with the assemblage of body and mind that we call people. And so the skandhas, so the ayatanas are 12, and the dhatus add the consciousness. There's the ayatanas are the eye faculty and the objects of the eye faculty, and the dhatus are the eye faculty, sense faculty, and the object of the eye sense faculty, colors and shapes, and the consciousness which arises from that. So they're very similar, and there's a slight nuance in them that is not really relevant to our discussion, but they're just different ways of understanding how to look at our experience separate from the belief that there's a me that floats around and decides what to be conscious of and when and how. Right? Because in the ayatanas and the dhatus, there's no I. Not the eyeball type of I. There's no me. So one way of breaking down the fixation on me-ness. The other way of breaking that down is to look at our experience in terms of skandhas, which has greater granularity on the sixth consciousness, mind, and its objects, by breaking that down into 4 skandhas. So when we look at the skandhas of there being 5 of them, from form, feeling, perception, formation, or concepts, to or mental faculty, mental functions, factors, sorry, or consciousness, 4 of those are mind. So mind has these different aspects. It has consciousness, which is generally that part of our mind that is preoccupied with thinking about everything else, commenting, usually verbally, but not always. And it has the quality of wakefulness. So we say consciousness and unconsciousness. Subconsciousness gets more complicated, but we have consciousness, and then consciousness, there's the perception of form, which includes our body, and then all of the matter around us everywhere is form. The perception of form, the stages of the perception of form by the mind roughly follows the sequence of feeling. First, there's like a feeling tone immediately to every moment of experience of phenomena. And then there's a perception. We have a feeling tone, and then we perceive the object of the sense. And then we have a whole range of different mental factors that range from sort of functional aspects of mind, like attention and focus and attention, focus, interest, and a few other things, as well as emotional feelings, positive and negative. Most importantly, the 6 root negative emotions of attachment, aggression, stupidity, pride, and doubt. And the sixth one is wrong view, which continues all the time that we're not enlightened, but only while we're not enlightened. So there's a lot of time where that wrong view won't be around, but it might be long into the future. So the skandhas gives us another way of breaking down our experience, which has this overriding sense of me-ness to it, into different sort of bare facts, bare faculties, building blocks of experience that are selfless, as a way of reducing the fixation on the belief in a self. So in the early tradition of the Buddha, which today comes down to us in texts called Abhidharma texts, higher Dharma texts, the crux of those presentations is to go into excruciating detail about the three skills, skandhas, dhatus, and ayatanas, and to classify them in very many ways, both individually and then in combination. The advanced Abhidharma is all about the combinations of those. If A, then what other dharmas can you have? Dharmas are, the term dharma in this context refers to every element of experience. Every particle of experience is a dharma. So the eye is a dharma, the eye sense faculty is a dharma, the eye object is a dharma, and the eye sense consciousness is a dharma. So all of the skandhas, ayatanas, and dhatus are all dharmas. And then there's dharmas that try to capture what are not, what's basically there's a breakdown of phenomena in the world in three categories. There's form, there's matter, that has different types, generally organized in the Buddhist tradition around the four great ones, which is a translation of the term in Sanskrit, the Mahabhutas, the great elements, earth, water, fire, air. So there's five elements, and then there's five, the five objects of the sense consciousnesses are different types of form. That the five great elements assemble themselves together into and make up the objects of our sense consciousnesses. And then there's different types of mind. There's the six consciousnesses. There's the faculties that I went through of attention and interest and contact and awareness and concentration and so forth. And then there's the emotional responses, the negative and positive. And so those are the first two of the three main categories of phenomena in our world: form and mind. And the third one is that which is neither form nor mind. And that includes concepts and thoughts and like energies in the world that we can't quite capture in a static way, but have a dynamic sort of life to them, to use a sort of poetic phrase. And so the progression of the development of prajna, or understanding, begins with understanding what are the what you might call the elements of experience in our world. What is it that we experience? We can experience form, we can experience mind, and to some extent we can experience these forces that include life force, it includes time, it includes the different phases of production, of origination, being arising, dwelling, passing away. And it's sort of a hodgepodge category. The early Buddhists' way of trying to categorize and capture the dynamic activity that functions between the static elements of the dharmas, the I consciousness and the I faculty and the I object. How do those things interact to cause and effect, basically? Cause and effect. And so Vipassana is the way to cultivate that understanding, that prajna, which, as its name implies, transcendent understanding, transcends the idea of there being a self involved in there, and looks at how these three realms of phenomena interact and produce our experience without the need for a self. So within that, then we enter into the practice. We return back to how do we meditate on this? What is the meditation practice? And in the Mahayana tradition, so we've read through this presentation in this text, Moonbeams of Mahamudra, where the author divides meditation between the common system of the sutras, meaning what we would call Hinayana, Mahayana, and then the uncommon tradition of Vajrayana, which we'll start getting to in the next course or next segment of this. And the cultivation of shamatha in this tradition has a progression through three stages. Stage of shamatha, where we're focused on a concrete object, an object that we can perceive with our senses, with our 5 of our 6 senses, like the breath, like an image of the Buddha, like a statue of the Buddha, or a color, or a stick, or a pebble, anything like that. We start with a sense, dualistic sense object framework. And then we shift to what's called a non-concrete support for shamatha, which is an object that is not so clear-cut in terms of its materiality. And sometimes the breath is put in this category, and sometimes it's not. I think our author did put the breath in this category. It has a sort of nebulous quality of like, where does it begin? Where does it end? Where does it reside? What is the breath? And it moves. And so a non-concrete support would be something that can't easily be situated and pinned down with the subject-object framework. And then the third phase of meditation is when we progress to the point where we can remain in a meditative state, which is the key phrase or refrain in this progression, without there being a concrete or a non-concrete support, but without a support, which we then learn means other than the mind itself. The mind itself becomes the support. The mind takes itself as the support for meditation practice. And while these are presented as 3 separate, seemingly separate objects and meditative scenarios, what we receive from Trungpa Rinpoche as an example of how this lineage, how this scheme is actually understood and practiced in this tradition, is that our practice naturally flows through those stages by virtue of focusing our practice on the cultivation of the different faculties of shamatha as opposed to the object. We're not trying to become experts at being with the breath. We're trying to cultivate a stable, strong, and clear mind through shamatha. And we're using different objects to do that. And the gradual subtlety that's presented in this scheme of objects means that our stability, strength, and clarity are becoming more and more subtle because the object becomes more and more subtle to the point where there is no external object. And so the subtlety of that meditative state becomes very profound in the third type. And we see how Trungpa Rinpoche presents this progression in the Profound Treasury in his presentation of the four foundations of mindfulness, which he says is a description of the progression of shamatha. And you can read that in his presentation, the way he uses the body and the breath as the beginning object and the foundation of body. And then he uses the other senses, the quality of sense experience, and what he calls life force as a non-concrete object in the second phase of the three phases of meditative practice, in what he calls mindfulness of life. And then the third one is mindfulness of effort, where there really is no object, and he presents the practice of just experiencing the sudden flash of being, of presence, basically. And then when he presents the fourth one, he calls it mindfulness of mind, and he says there's nothing additional, it's just the coordination of the three. So we then have this ability to experience those three levels of shamatha practice, where there's a concrete object, a non-concrete object, and no support, depending on where we are in our own meditation practice, either in general throughout our life, or in this period of time. Let's say your meditation practice has been neglected for a while and you need to begin again with a much more sort of basic subject-object framework, or over time your meditation practice becomes more and more subtle. And Trungpa Rinpoche presents space as the object of the third type of shamatha without support, space being a sort of mythical object that has no entityness to it. But by using that poetic sort of phrase, he helps us experience a significantly more subtle state of meditation, of shamatha, by focusing on space. And space in the Buddhist tradition is the analogy for mind. So when we say space, we basically mean the nature of mind. The nature of mind is like space. And so when he uses space or panoramic awareness of the space, he's basically talking about being aware of your mind. And then we have the Vipassana, the presentation of Vipassana, which began outside of the cushion by understanding our experience through the three different ways of looking at that, of skandhas, ayatanas, and dhatus. And then we get we understand more and more subtle ways of looking at our experience. In order to understand egolessness, we look at the relationship between the first stage of Vipassana, of prajna, of hearing, we basically identify all the aspects of our experience, the perceiver and the potential objects. And then we, in the middle phase of contemplation and reflection, we look at the sense of self in relationship to the skandhas, dhatus, and ayatanas. And we have, there's a very clear and distinct process of understanding what is my sense of self. And we say initially the sense of self, the most tangible version of that is the sense of self is that it's doesn't change moment by moment. I'm the same person as I was. I'm the same me as I was as a child, and we all are. We all have that feeling that we're the same me, and we have the feeling that we're one person. That even though there's all these different aspects, I'm one person. I'm me. There's one me, and we believe we're independent that we like decide what to think and say and do and feel on our own. Nobody tells us what to do. Has no, it's not just mechanical functioning of skandhas and ayatanas, but there's a me there that's deciding things based on my prior experience and predilections and so forth. And so then we go through a process of understanding how perception happens, the different ways that perception happens, and the different possible relationships between my sense of self and, for example, the skandhas. And we go through the different permutations of that. And we develop a very sophisticated way of comparing one thing to another thing that involves a level of logical reasoning that we'll see reference to tonight. And so that's the middle phase of Vipassana, where without having studied logic and all the details of that, we do it instinctually in our mind. We look at, if this is the same as that, then it must be the same all the time. It must be the same from all angles. And if it's different, then it must be different all the time and from all different points of view. And then finally, we bring that understanding of the misfit between a sense of self and our actual direct experience into our meditative practice, where we discover over time the instinctual, unconscious, non-conceptual impulse of me-ness, which is the sort of indescribable sense of self. It's like we go through all the analysis and say and conclude logically with our mind, okay, yeah, there's no way that there's a self within this complex of body and mind. It's just there's all these different factors, and experience happens in this sort of mechanistic way. And yet I'm completely fixated on this sense of me anyway, even though I've proven to myself that it just doesn't make sense in no way, shape, or form. But I'm just here. I know I'm here. And so we have this totally illogical and deeply rooted sense of being here. And so in meditation practice, we strive to find that sort of inexpressible root of this whole situation by coming at it through the different ways that we learned in the phases of hearing and contemplating. And so and then in this section of the text, having gone through that vaguely, and I didn't go through the specifics of the Vipassana chapter, or the Vipassana presentation, the way I did in the Shamatha, where I went through the 3 stages. And I focused on the 3 qualities of stability. So shamatha, we have 3 stages of shamatha, with concrete form, with non-concrete object, and then without support or without object. And we have 3 qualities that we cultivate: stability, strength, and clarity. And we have 3 faculties that we cultivate. We cultivate mindfulness, focused attention on an object. We cultivate alertness, which is a general sense of wakefulness, or watchfulness, investigation, or curiosity, maybe is a good one. And then thirdly, this all-encompassing quality of conscientiousness, of just constantly being like caring what happens in our experience in our world throughout our day in a way that hopefully is different from what our experience was before we began meditation practice, where we just sort of did whatever we did, somewhat mindlessly, but not, we wouldn't necessarily have said it was mindless. We're very focused. We're trying to do X, Y, and Z, but we're not like aware that we're doing X, Y, and Z the way ideally through meditation practice. Outside of meditation, we have this constant sense of what the frame is. what Dharma is, what the direction of our life is towards enlightenment, ideally, right? In Vipassana, he presents these three schemes. He presents what he calls the three gateways, the four types, and then the six, what are they, the six objects? I can't remember the term he uses. But there's a scheme of 3, 4, and 6. And I thought I would go through that next week. And instead come back to the text now with the additional slight preface that there's other schemes of ways of characterizing shamatha and vipassana, or of characterizing meditation practice. And the main one is this idea that a meditation practice can be either resting meditation, which is maybe it's non-conceptual, maybe it's non-discursive, it has a sense of inactivity or non-active phase to it. And then there's this idea that there's meditations that are active, where we're actively sort of doing something. Like if we cultivate loving kindness, we're like actively trying to increase a natural faculty that we possess of loving kindness, and we're trying to increase that by imagining certain situations or saying certain words over and over again. So there's this idea that there's two ways, these other ways of looking at meditation other than shamatha and vipassana, of active meditation and sort of passive, relaxed meditation. And what the author goes through is that there has been a tendency over the centuries that leads up to his particular time period in like the 16th century, I think, where there has become this tendency to affiliate resting meditation with shamatha and active meditation with vipassana. And he goes about trying to dispel that very simplistic and incorrect framework by showing that both shamatha and vipassana have both active and resting aspects to them. And so that framework of affiliating resting with shamatha, or non-active with shamatha, and active with vipassana doesn't hold. Now, the part that I think has been confusing from the beginning for many of us is that we've been presented with a vipassana practice that is a resting type of practice, that is an inactive practice. Those of us who are sort of students in the world of Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche have been taught from day one that vipassana is awareness, and it's panoramic awareness. It's that special type of awareness that's panoramic, meaning it experiences the environment around either us physically or around, like, whatever our experience is inside our head. We're also experiencing sort of the space internally around that thought, around that obsession or emotion, as well as we're experiencing the space around us physically, or maybe you might say metaphysically, in the larger realm. And so we've been taught that vipassana is a way of resting in that space, in that panoramic awareness. And there's basically at least two ways of looking at what Trungpa Rinpoche has done. One is that he's presented the third type of shamatha without an object, which focuses on the mind, in this case exemplified by space, that we experience through our panoramic awareness, and he's presented that as vipassana. Or he's presented what the tradition holds to be the culmination of vipassana practice, which is resting in the experience of the true nature of reality as being uncreated, unfabricated, unceasing, unidentifiable, and all sorts of other uns. you know, basically beyond classification and categorization by our conceptual mind. And that would be great, except that that type of Vipassana is very advanced, and the tradition presents that one either has to go through Vipassana with activity, analytical Vipassana, in order to culminate in the non-analytical or resting Vipassana, or one has to pursue that using the path of Vajrayana and have an experience of a sort of tantric nature, much like Naropa's experience when Tilopa took off his sandal and slapped him in the face after 24 years of training, and then said, "That's it." You know, so after 24 years of unbelievably intense training, Naropa was ready to experience that advanced state. And so that's the quandary in terms of comparing what we've been taught and learned as Vipassana practice versus the tradition. The tradition universally views Vipassana practice as a discursive, active practice. But again, what our author does in this section is he breaks that down and says, well, Vipassana can't forever remain analytical and active. It has to culminate in resting in experiencing the true nature of reality. Otherwise, it's not progressing to its aim, to its goal of liberating us from the mistaken belief in self and other. So we're on page 89. Sorry that was so long-winded and boring. On the bottom of page 89, we're in the section called The Roles of Analytical and Resting Meditation in Shamatha and Vipassana. Certain people. So this is where we get into the world of Tibetan polemics, where like, you guys say this and you're wrong because of blah, blah, blah. And so here we have a holder of the tradition of Gampopa, of the Kagyu lineage, the command lineage, that is going to present the view of the Kagyu tradition in terms of these various topics that I preambled. And the certain people are generally the Gelugpas, headed by the founder of the Gelugpas, Tsongkhapa. And they present and assert and practice and are very stalwartly convinced that meditation has to be a certain way that is different than what this gentleman is going to present, and he'll do his best to prove his case about that. But certain people basically means Tsongkhapa and his followers. They assert that only resting meditation is done in shamatha practice because alternating between analysis and resting makes it impossible to perfect shamatha. So they say shamatha can't have any activeness to it. It has to be completely still. And they say if Vipassana practice does not include analysis with discerning prajna, it vanishes. If you don't have discernment, it turns into shamatha. You're back at shamatha. That the only thing that makes it Vipassana in the tradition of those certain people is the active analysis of the nature and the extent of phenomena. So looking at the universe of our experience in terms of the relative world, meaning the extent, or our translators translated as the quantity of phenomena, how phenomena appear, causes and conditions, how they manifest, is the relative level of reality. And then the ultimate is, what is their nature? Are they one or many? Are they actually truly existent or not, as separate, unchanging, independent entities? So nature and extent, nature being the ultimate level and extent being the relative level. So if Vipassana doesn't continue to analyze and discern those aspects, then it becomes shamatha. According to those people, such ideas are very wrong. If the former were the case, some of the objects of meditation and shamatha, such as those for purifying behavior and purifying the mental afflictions, such as the meditations on loving kindness or the ugliness of the decomposition of the corpse in order to overcome attachment, loving kindness to overcome hatred, and so forth. Those are active meditations that have um, analysis in them, but they're basically universally viewed as shamatha type practices, as shamatha practices, but they have analytical aspects to them. So it breaks this firm rule of affiliating non-analytical with shamatha and analytical with vipassana. Those would be unsuitable, and it would be inappropriate to arouse discerning prajna and forceful alertness during shamatha practice, which is what we do to cultivate vipassana. If the latter were the case, the vipassana described as the pacification of discernments at the end of the analysis done by discerning prajna would be illogical. So what he's saying, if you read that sentence like differently, he's saying that at the end of the analysis done by discerning prajna in vipassana practice, there's a pacification of discernments. When we conclude the analysis, there's at a certain point there's no need to analyze further. It simply stirs up the mind and keeps the mind like going like over and over again the same thing like a broken record. And instead, when one has completed the analysis, one should rest and experience the result of the analysis, the understanding that one developed in that analysis. So both shamatha and vipassana have an active and an inactive phase to them. Basically, shamatha begins with an active phase of actively thinking, what am I doing? Why am I here? How did I get tied into this? What a mistake I made. And then like looking at, endless thoughts about the same thing and experiencing boredom and cultivating mindfulness, alertness and conscientiousness and noticing the hindrances of agitation and dullness and applying the antidotes. So it begins with an active process and gradually becomes less and less active as one accomplishes shamatha. And Vipassana actually follows the same trajectory where initially it's active and analytical, and gradually as one comes to the culmination of the analysis, it then becomes inactive and resting. So they actually both have this similar trajectory. So at the bottom of the page, at the end of analysis done by discerning prajna would be illogical, and the teachings on non-conceptual vipassana and unmoving vipassana that are found in the text on the stages of meditation would be invalid. So he implies there that in the text on meditation there is a presentation such that the culmination of vipassana is non-conceptual and unmoving. Robert, you are muted. Shh.
So just to be clear, when just doing the basic mechanics of shamatha, there's actual vipassana happening.
There's an active discerning process going on.
And the same with vipassana, because you've done the analysis, it's time to stop now. So
Yeah,
the
yeah,
shamatha kicks in as well as a part of the mechanics.
That's right. So in shamatha, the vipassana aspect is the alertness. The alertness functions in a discursive way, in a subtly discursive way, saying, "Am I on the object or not? Did I space out? Did I forget the object and start thinking about it again or not?" So that alertness factor is actually what leads into vipassana, and it's the vipassana-like factor in shamatha. And
Right,
in
and it turns into vipassana when it gets so when it becomes when the thinking when the discursiveness becomes too fast for words even.
right, it becomes like non-verbal discernment. And they give this analogy of and some people give this analogy of being able to see when our mind is drifted at the moment it's happening, and then is the initial phase, the coarse alertness, and then subtle alertness is anticipating. Oh, my mind is. I'm going to start going down that track and think again about X, Y, or Z, and that's a much less discursive, much less verbal phase of the alertness, where it's
And,
like, oh, we feel this tendency, like we feel drowsiness or we feel agitation coming.
and that's almost non-conceptual right there.
That's right.
So and that's where we're trying to go with all of it in terms of waking up.
Well, we'll see and hear the the realm of non-conceptuality is not exclusively enlightened or awakened.
No, but I'm saying but that's the world we want to necessarily
That is, that
find.
is, we want to enter into the non-conceptual realm with full discernment, with full awareness, as opposed to the alternative is you have a non-conceptual ignorance.
Right, which is what basically the animal world.
Yeah, but we all partake in that. It's like that gut instinct of meanness. The very, basic root level of it is a non-conceptual presumption that I exist. Furthermore, those who advocate such positions then have to say that there is no shamatha during analysis and no vipassana during resting, because they assert that analysis is exclusively conceptual analysis and shamatha is solely non-conceptual, because they assert that during resting meditation vipassana vanishes and there is no discerning prajna. If they say those things, they are huge. The translator uh, inserts absurd as the implied term consequences. The unification of shamatha and vipassana would be impossible. That is the very nature of the unification of shamatha and vipassana, is that you have both stability and discernment happening at the same time. So these are not mutually exclusive factors the way love and hate are. One of the things they do in the classification of dharmas, they go through in minute detail mental states, what factors can be present with what other factors at the same time. And love and hate cannot be present rather in the same mind at the same exact time. And and so some people, meditators, think that analysis and stability can't be present at the same time, that they're mutually exclusive factors. But that then negates the whole idea of the union of shamatha and vipassana, which is stable analysis. Um, if they say those things, there are huge consequences. And there would be no common locus. This is a very technical way of saying um, there would there would never be the experience of both non-conceptual cognition and vipassana. which is the goal, non-conceptual vipassana. Then we may ask, what are the roles of analysis in resting in shamatha vipassana? In the context of shamatha, resting meditation predominates in keeping with the practice tradition of the 9 ways of resting the mind. It is thought, however, that it is necessary to do analytical meditation once samadhi has improved. As the first stages of meditation by Kamala Shila explains, when your concentration has improved, then you should focus in detail with specific objects such as the skandhas and the dhatus. This is, I think, one of the very unusual things, or one of the topics that most of us find very unusual, is that they do shamatha on complicated objects like skandhas and ayatanas. And we think those are inherently vipassanas, but they're listed as shamatha type practices where one understands visual experience and one practices shamatha on bare sense experience through the visual dhatu.
That's
Yes,
because it is the shamatha experience of the skandhas, like it's an experience of it rather than thinking about it.
yes, that's
Yeah.
right. That's
Okay.
right. It's like you've already thought about it. You identified it. Okay, now you're
Form,
gonna,
feelings,
yeah,
like, which,
yeah. So you become very aware of
yeah.
that idea of there being feeling as the second skandha, that our basic level of reaction to all experience is a feeling tone. So we learn that, and then we actually identify it in our experience through the development of great strength of our shamatha, and then we dwell on the level of that feeling and examine feeling on a moment by moment basis. And
That
so
sounds like Theravadan practice.
it's very much like Theravada practice. Yes, indeed. And one is not at the same time just analytically um, looking at the nature of that experience. One is just using that experience of feeling tone as a way of developing stability, strength, and clarity. But one's not using it to try to understand the nature or extent of phenomena. We're not looking at how feeling comes about, what it leads to. We're not looking at whether it's empty or intrinsically real when we do shamatha on feeling. Let's see. There are also many types of analytical meditations recommended in the context of shamatha, such as meditating on ugliness as the antidote for desire, on kindness as the antidote for anger, and dependent origination as the remedy for bewilderment. In the context of vipassana, analytical meditation predominates in keeping with the 3 or 4 stages of vipassana. Interestingly, he doesn't mention the 6, the scheme of 6, which lends support to my feeling that the 6 is a presentation of the potential objects of vipassana, whereas the 3 and the 4, the schemes of 3 and 4 types of vipassana, are presentations of the stages of vipassana, not the potential objects. However, at the end of the analysis done by discerning prajna, discernments are pacified and nothing is seen. So rather than that being a negative experience, that's the culmination. When they say nothing is seen, that means that you understand that nothing exists independently to be seen. However, let's see, since vipassana does not vanish at that point, and that is the true object seen in vipassana, that nothing to be seen is the true object seen in vipassana. At that point, we must use resting meditation. So it's resting vipassana. The Sutra of the Questions of Kashyapa says fire springs up from the rubbing of 2 sticks, and its presence then consumes both sticks. Similarly, both sticks meaning the conceptual mind, the analytical mind, and the conceptual mind that the analytical mind analyzes. Similarly, once the faculty of prajna arises from discernment, its presence consumes those two, both the discernment, what is being understood, as well as the faculty that's understanding it. The entrance to the middle way by Chandrakirti says ordinary beings are bound by their concepts. Yogins and yoginis without concept are free. Thus the wise teach the reversing of concepts to be the result of analysis. Once we have achieved the unification of shamatha vipassana, we should primarily do resting meditation. So the condition there is a rather significant one and should not be dismissed without some caution. It begins with once we have achieved the unification of shamatha vipassana. That means like you've actually achieved a very, either like the 9th stage of shamatha and like complete vipassana, or at least some very advanced stage of shamatha and vipassana. So once you have achieved, we should primarily do resting meditation. So that's like a very advanced stage. That's not what a beginner should necessarily do. Though on occasion it will be necessary to alternate that with analytical meditation, to still come back into analytical meditation when our resting meditation becomes conceptual. The relevant scriptural sources will be provided below to support this. Nevertheless, it's explained that as beginners, when we experience agitation from an excess of analytical meditation and vipassana, we should cultivate shamatha. So we have to find this balance. When we do vipassana to the point where it produces agitation, the discursiveness becomes too discursive, then we need to chill out and we need to do shamatha. And when the shamatha becomes too sort of dull, then we need to do vipassana.
Is that not too tight, not too loose?
It's very much not too tight, not too loose. Exactly. Yeah. When we feel sluggishness from too much resting, meditation, or shamatha, we should cultivate vipassana. When we can rest with equal amounts of sugar and salt, shamatha vipassana, we should cultivate equanimity without active application. Kamala Shila's first book, called Stages of Meditation, explains if you do not dispel mental dullness, extreme dullness will prevent vipassana and cause your mind to be like a blind person. Since that is the case, when dullness occurs, you must dispel it. When cultivating vipassana, prajna may become dominant. At that point, that is all there is, meaning your shamatha is weak. Your mind will waver like a candle flame in a windy location, and consequently, you'll be unable to see suchness clearly. Since that is the case, when it happens, cultivate shamatha. When shamatha becomes dominant, cultivate prajna. And one of the key features here is that the object that is being sought, particularly in vipassana, or specifically in vipassana, is not the main concern. The main concern in vipassana is how we experience phenomena, not what we experience, but how we experience. Let's see. It also says when you're able to rest equally in both, remain without any active application as long as that does not strain your body or mind. Rest equally in both without any active application. Once shamatha and vipassana mix and are unified, it's not necessary to repeatedly alternate between analysis and resting while the one-pointed mind remains in equipoise, i.e. a very advanced state. As the Buddha says in the Unraveling the Intent Sutra, at what point does shamatha and vipassana mix and become evenly unified? So this is the Bodhisattva Maitreya asking the Buddha, and the Buddha replies, here called the Bhagawan, replies, when there is attentiveness to the one-pointed mind, that is when they mix. That is when shamatha and vipassana mix. When there's discernment of the still mind. It also says, what is the one-pointed mind? It understands that representations for the sphere of samadhi are simply cognition. So the one-pointed mind has that, in this case, of the union of shamatha vipassana, it has the understanding that all experience is a mental projection. Having understood that, it is attentive to thusness. So having understood that everything that we experience through our mind is our mind, we then understand the supreme object, which is suchness. Acharya Jnanagarbha's commentary on that text explains. So he wrote a commentary on this 8th chapter of the Unraveling the Intent Sutra, the chapter on shamatha vipassana. The path of shamatha is not different from the path of vipassana because shamatha observes the mind that is the object of vipassana. So in both shamatha and vipassana, the object of meditation is the mind. So he's talking here about the third level of shamatha, where we've shifted from a concrete or non-concrete support to shamatha without support, i.e. shamatha on the mind. And that is the object of vipassana. The object of vipassana is to understand the mind, the nature of the mind, because the mind contains everything. On the path of shamatha, since only the mind, that is the object of vipassana, is observed, the object observed and the observer are identical in being of the nature of the mind. So in shamatha, we initially meditate on the breath, and gradually we realize that the breath is our mind. The breath that we meditate on is the mental breath, just like Rinpoche talks about the psychosomatic body. We're meditating on our mental version of the body, our mental version of the breath, our mental version of whatever sensory experience it is. Therefore, shamatha and vipassana are not different. And this helps us understand, I think, a little bit why Trungpa Rinpoche in different talks on vipassana that he gives in different Vajradhatu seminaries, which are now condensed and compiled into the Profound Treasury, where sometimes in one place he says shamatha and vipassana are very different, completely different. And then in another place he says they're basically the same. They're very, very similar. The roles of analysis and resting and meditation on the view. If you remember, we're in the Vipassana chapter, which is understanding the view, cultivating the view, and then cultivating the experience of the view in meditation. So what are the roles of resting and analysis in meditating on the view? Certain people, again, Sankapa, explain that when we are sustaining the view, first we must forcefully generate an apprehension of the emptiness of reality by analyzing with scriptures and reasonings, and then practice a little bit of resting meditation on that. And he's talking about Tsongkhapa's great stages of the path, Lamrim and Chenmo. If we were to practice resting meditation for a long time, it would simply become shamatha, and any vipassana would vanish. Therefore, they say that we must analyze as before and meditate while alternating analysis and resting in that way, presenting this idea that there's this firm division between analysis and resting. That is very illogical. Later I'll explain the reasons why, but now I'll keep you in suspense. If we have any kind of apprehension of the emptiness of reality that arises based on analysis using scriptures and reasonings, we won't get beyond grasping at emptiness and consequently will not develop the correct view for vipassana. So this may seem like a maybe contradictory or incorrect statement, because we think, well, emptiness is what we're trying to understand. It's the view of emptiness, and we're cultivating that and developing that and meditating on that. And the idea is that we try to remember what I said a few minutes ago, that it's not the object that matters, it's the way we experience. And so if we think, oh, we're trying to understand emptiness, why is that a problem? It's a problem because our conceptual mind has conceptualized emptiness and made it into a thing. Instead of the whole idea of meditating on emptiness is to experience the letting go of the conceptual framework of the fabric of our samsaric world, the structure of our world as made up of conceptual framework. Let's see. That being the case, practicing resting meditation on that apprehension of emptiness is not correct meditation. So if we meditate on emptiness as being the apprehension that the apprehension of emptiness that arises based on analysis, if we meditate on that apprehension, then we've made emptiness into a conceptual object, and we're just meditating on conceptual mind again. If in their approach, analysis and resting are always alternated, then even those who rest evenly in the view will be unable to master it, because they say that it's impossible to perfect shamatha when analysis and resting are alternated. And those reasonings that apply to resting evenly in shamatha are equally applicable to resting evenly in the view. That was not 100% crystal clear, but I think we get his point that if you have these very sharply limited ways of understanding analysis and resting, then it makes us misunderstand the progression of shamatha and vipassana. It would become illogical then to do resting meditation at the end of analysis, because since they say that vipassana vanishes when we rest, resting meditation on a view in which vipassana has disappeared would not be a correct meditation. It would be returning to shamatha. According to that tradition, it's also illogical that once we give rise to the view in which shamatha and vipassana are unified, if we do not repeatedly analyze it, it reverts to being just shamatha. He says that's illogical. Why should it do that? When the view in which shamatha and vipassana are unified has arisen, one-pointed resting meditation on just that view contains both shamatha and vipassana completely, and that is the unification of shamatha and vipassana. It is not feasible that after having done resting meditation on the view, we must again repeatedly analyze. Analysis using scriptures and reasonings does not go beyond being a conceptual process involving terms and reference. Reference are what the terms refer to, which are generally conceptual constructs. And since that is ignorant conceptuality, it is explained as being an object to be abandoned for non-conceptual wisdom. Although the sutra on the questions of Kashyapa and the stages of meditation teach that non-conceptual wisdom arises from discerning prajna, they only say that such prajna is essential at first when determining the view. They do not say that we must repeatedly examine and analyze to sustain the view. For the most part, certainty that results from rational analysis does not go beyond being inferential, meaning conceptual, rational cognition arising from reflection, all of which are conceptual, and it is not non-conceptual, unmistaken cognition. It is also untenable to equate the meditation of resting in the view with shamatha, because the two are significantly different, the view and shamatha. Shamatha is simply to sustain the stream of mindfulness that does not consider anything other than its object of meditation. That's a nice description of shamatha. Sustaining the stream of mindfulness that does not consider anything other than its object of meditation. Resting right within the view is to ascertain the emptiness of inherent nature and then sustain the stream of freedom from elaborations that is concordant with that situation, i.e. emptiness. Then we may ask, what are the roles of analysis in resting and sustaining the view? First, when investigating the view, the prajna arising from listening and reflection, those are the first two of the three prajnas, cuts through misinterpretations concerning specifically and generally characterized phenomena. So we encountered these odd terms earlier of specifically and generally characterized phenomena. Specifically characterized phenomena are not conceptual phenomena. They are skandhas, ayatanas, and dhatus are specifically characterized phenomena. The terminology is bizarre, but the idea is it's a specific instance of a phenomena, whereas a generally characterized phenomenon is extrapolating a sense of chairness upon experiencing a configuration of colors and shapes that we all agree is a chair. We then focus on chairness. So those are misinterpretations concerning specifically and generally characterized phenomena. One way of characterizing our experience of ignorance is that we mix the generally characterized idea of chairness with each instance of chair. We think, okay, every time I encounter something that we would call a chair, it it possesses chairness. And so the idea of chairness is something that spans all instances of chair, and all instances of chair possess chairness. Yeah, that's a yawner, isn't it? It's definitely a yawning sort of topic. For inducing certainty, this is crucial, like showing a horse the racetrack. However, for investigating the correct view, the discerning prajna arisen from meditation, as opposed to the prajna arisen from learning and contemplation, or listening and contemplation, is of the utmost importance. For investigating the correct view, the third type of prajna, when we look and analyze with that prajna without relying on inference, which is a conceptual process that's used in logic and reasoning, we're able to directly comprehend that all phenomena lack any nature or essence. And we're able to directly comprehend that, i.e. non-conceptually, without the framework of generally characterized phenomena, i.e. ideas, without inferential conceptual cognition. And that very discernment, that non-conceptual comprehension of that all phenomena lack any nature or essence, that very discernment will be experienced as disappearing and not existing with any essence. So as opposed to identifying the object of the comprehension of the lack of nature or essence in all phenomena, as opposed to that becoming an object, we are left without object, which is a subtle but very important distinction. If we retain the emptiness of all phenomena as an object, since the emptiness of all phenomena has no characteristics, there's no way that we can perceive it. There's no way that we can comprehend it or experience it. It's a term that refers to letting go of all types of experience or comprehension. But if we mistakenly think, oh, I'm focused on that emptiness, then we've missed the boat. So that is the actual view. Looking and analyzing in that way is analysis with the prajna of equipoise, i.e. meditation, union of shamatha vipassana, in which the stream of mindfulness during resting meditation is not lost. So shamatha vipassana conjoined, we still have the stream of mindfulness from shamatha still present with the analysis with the analysis with the prajna of equipoise. It is not analysis involving a conceptual process of terms and reference, as explained in the first stage of the meditation. Once you've stabilized your mind in an object of meditation with shamatha, if you examine with prajna, the light of true wisdom will manifest. At that time, the dawning of wisdom's light will be like that which dispels darkness. Those two, shamatha and vipassana, like eyes and light, are mutually compatible conditions for the dawning of true wisdom. They are not internally incompatible as light and darkness are. So resting and analysis are not incompatible. Light and darkness are incompatible. Shamatha and prajna are not incompatible. Samadhi is not of the nature of darkness. What is it? It is characterized as being the one-pointed mind. Since it is said, when you rest evenly in that, you know what is true, just as it is. Samadhi is completely compatible with prajna, not incompatible. That being so, when the prajna of equipoise examines, its non-observance of phenomena is the genuine observation. Such characteristics of a yogin's or yoginis shamatha phase are spontaneously existent because there is nothing to be seen outside of that. So in the prajna of equipoise, prajna that is risen upon the basis of shamatha vipassana conjoined, its non-observation of phenomena is the genuine non-observation. Not seeing anything is true seeing. After discernment is self-pacified, when discernment sort of fizzles itself out because the two sticks have rubbed together and burned each other up, so discernment is self-pacified, there's naturally an absence of seeing any phenomena whatsoever. That is seeing the true nature. The same text, i.e. first stages of meditation states, it is said in the sutras, what does seeing the ultimate mean? It is the absence of seeing any phenomena. With that absence of seeing in mind, the Buddha said, there is no seeing. That is not the no seeing, that is the result of not being attentive or the incompleteness of conditions, such as in the case with someone who has their eyes shut or who is blind, and therefore they don't see. When the prajna of equipoise examines, its non-observation of phenomena is the genuine non-observation. For those reasons, when we are investigating the view at first, we definitely must engage in analytical meditation using our discerning prajna within meditative equipoise. Once we have discovered the view, if at any point our intellectual process of apprehending characteristics makes our state of mind unworkable, in other words, that is incompatible with the genuine view. The genuine view is not an intellectual process of apprehending characteristics. The genuine view is the non-conceptual experience of the absence of characteristics. We should then do whatever analytical meditation is appropriate to eliminate that mistake when we have incontrovertible certainty in the view, which is that there's nothing to see. We should do resting meditation right within the view on all occasions that create familiarization with the view. There's no need to alternate with analytical meditation. The relative scriptural sources will be provided below. So what he's saying is that in Tsongkhapa's presentation of Shamatha Vipassana, there's this presentation that one should continually regenerate analysis. Even once one has come to the culmination of the analytical phase and understood that there's nothing to be understood, he says one should continue the analysis and keep repeating it over and over again, the analysis on the basis of stability. Whereas this tradition is saying enough is enough. Once you've understood the view as being nothing to be understood, then one just rests there for as long as it lasts. And when it deteriorates one way or the other, meaning either into shamatha or discursiveness, then one applies the other. the explanations that remove doubts concerning the actual view, analyzing other systems. Some earlier Tibetans assert the view of not engaging the mind with any positive phenomena after having negated the apprehension of characteristics. That is illogical. Someone else says that is in keeping with the system of Heishang Moheyan. So, um, in the early days of Buddhism in Tibet, when Padmasambhava came in and he overpowered the obstructing forces of the Bun indigenous religion tradition and enabled the king and Shantarakshita to build the monastery of Samye and ordain monks and train translators and translate texts and so forth. Um, At that time, there was also a Chinese teacher by the name of Heishang Moheyan who was presenting a type of meditation that was sort of seemed nihilistic. He said, there's no need to do anything. Just cut off all mental activity. That's a little dubious as to what exactly he taught, because like most of history being written by the winners, he lost in a debate with Kamalashila about the right way to practice meditation, and he was banished. And so the history books all say that he taught this very wrong type of meditation practice, and that we should adhere to Kamalashila's stages of meditation practice. So he remains the sort of scapegoat or the straw man for the wrong interpretation of the other. It's sort of like going to the other extreme. On the one side, you have Tsongkhapa, who's recommending continuously applying analysis, and on the other hand, you have Moheyan Heishang, who's recommending no analysis, just completely let go into non-conceptuality and don't do any activity at all. So no meritorious activity, no cultivation of the field of merit, of the store of merit that's required by a bodhisattva in order to progress towards um, complete liberation of a Buddha. We need both merit and wisdom. And Heishang Moheyan, at least on the surface, was saying, don't do anything, just stop your mind. Um, Regardless of his statement, it is illogical, because lacking the certainty that is aware of suchness, their view will only promote a confused or unspecified neutral state of mind, just sort of like a blankness. Certain later Tibetan scholars assert that the view is the stream of certainty and not finding the phenomena of perceivers, having analyzed with scriptures and reasonings that employ reasons having the three modes. So this phrase, reasons having the three modes, is the stock phrase as a way that's used as a way of referring to complete logical reasoning as developed in the tradition of Buddhism by Dharmakirti and his predecessor Dignaga. And so here we have the statement. Certain later scholars assert that the view is the stream of certainty and not finding the phenomena. So there's this notion of experiencing emptiness, and that the view is the stream of certainty in experiencing emptiness. Our author says that position is not feasible because it is what the exalted Gampopa refers to as negated non-arisings, which is sort of focusing on the negation of what doesn't exist, and is basically like a samadhi on the state of denial of like not this, not this. And the idea of not this, not this, not that, or whatever, is then to let go and not to continue saying not this, not this. But this presentation is sort of similar to just continuing to say not this, not this, not this.
Just a note that this is one of the few footnotes that actually has.
Oh, good. What does it say? Has
Well,
something significant?
yeah, well, it basically said that that there were these two types of non-arisings. One is negated non-arisings, which he references here, which is basically what you were describing. He calls it emptiness arrived at through determining the established conclusion regarding the self-entities of persons and phenomena.
Catchy phrase.
Right. And then natural non-arisings is the other type of non-arising, and that was the self-liberating within emptiness through meditating on the path of method. And he mentions that manifestation of oneself as a Buddha is a natural non-arising. And he also mentioned that I think that the negated non-arisings do not include the natural ones, but it seems like the natural ones do include the negated ones. There's some little thing at the end about that.
Neat.
Anyway, I just wanted to mention because most of
Thank
these
you very
footnotes
much.
don't have anything but references.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. A substantial footnote. Cool. Let's see. Because it is a partial emptiness, conceptually fabricated. So it's like dwelling over and over again on the idea of negation. And this again is a reference to the Gelugpa tradition that uses this method of skillful means in understanding emptiness, of identifying what is it that we believe exists that doesn't exist, and then we negate that. We compare that to reality and we find that to be untrue. And the Kagyupas, and to some extent Nyingmapas, don't really like using that technique because it can, when used incorrectly, lead to a state of mind that it continues to negate. Whereas the resting in the view means you're no longer negating because there's nothing to negate. Now, the Gelugpas, I'm sure, would say you've misunderstood and you've exaggerated our presentation, which is probably very true, at least in some cases. Let's see, we're out of time, so we'll just do these quotes. As a compendium of valid cognition by Dharmakirti states, those who are led to Dharmata. Dharmata is the promised land, right? What is it, Canada? Dharmata is the realm of the true nature of reality. Through the path of logic, corrupt the sage's teachings in terms of both the Dharma and the world. They've created a conceptually constructed sense of Dharmata. And the exalted Lord Atisha states to say that emptiness is seen by means of the two cognitions. The two types of cognition are conceptual and non-conceptual, which are technically referred to as direct, means non-conceptual, and inferential, means conceptual, is said to be confusion that just sees a short distance. If you're using that framework of cognition, conceptual and non-conceptual, and you conclude that you've seen emptiness, then you've seen a conceptually constructed phenomena because you can't see emptiness. So they misspoke by saying to say that emptiness is seen. I've been seen. So let's pause there and let that seep into our bones, and we'll come back to it next week and hopefully complete that section, plus go through the 3, 4, and 6. Any comments, questions, suggestions?
I do,
So,
but I'll ask the question, but I don't expect you to answer it. And I keep thinking about, like, just the role of faith in any of this, because this is all like really specific, but when you keep letting go and there's familiarization and things, something else comes up.
that's great. Faith is mentioned somewhere very soon in this chapter. Basically, that's what we're left with when we've eliminated all other possibilities. It's sort of like a quality of faith that we have that phenomena are non-arising, and we don't have to continue to analyze them. We can have trust. Faith, trust being synonymous in the Buddhist tradition. We can have faith in our experience, and we can have faith that the teachings of the Buddha that point to what we experience coincide, and we don't need to continue to doubt it and analyze further. So there's like a sophisticated level of faith in the Buddhist tradition, as well as there's an unsophisticated level of faith, which is believing without grounds for genuine belief or faith. So yeah, it's a way of experiencing. How do we experience the non-conceptual world? As we have faith that there is non-conceptual experience, and so we're able to let go.
So we also get faith from our teachers when they walk in the room and light the whole place up.
That's the Vajrayana skillful means, is when you experience the sort of radiance of somebody who is dwelling in that state. It generates faith. Oh, that state exists, and it basically the two gentlemen who created the system of logical reasoning, Dharmakirti and Dignaga, basically come to that same conclusion, that all of Buddhism resolves down to the Buddha's enlightenment, that the Buddha's enlightenment proves the true nature of reality. It proves Dharma. It proves it's the one and only proof of Buddhism, that you can be enlightened, that there is enlightenment. And so when you see the embodiment of it, it is very helpful for your practice. You see, oh, that is possible. Because we all have this like notion, initially at least, that if you're enlightened, if you have no sense of self, then you're like a jellyfish. You can't possibly make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich for yourself, or whatever. Whatever it is you have for dinner. So yeah, thanks for mentioning that. That's a very interesting topic, that it becomes very important. Anything else? Okay, let's dedicate the merit and close. By this merit may all attain omniscience, may it defeat the enemy, wrongdoing from the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness and death, from the ocean of samsara, may it free all beings. By the confidence of the golden sun of the great east, may the lotus garden of the Rigdon's wisdom bloom. May the dark ignorance of sentient beings be dispelled. May all beings enjoy profound, brilliant glory. Thank you, everyone. Great to see you. Take care. Hope to see you
Thank
next
you.
week.
Thank you, Derek.